Anyone who watches my videos knows that I'm no tree-hugging environmentalist, and that I love the smell of gasoline and the sound of a good old V8. Still, I'll be the first to criticize General Motors for what was probably the most predictable failure of the 21st century in the automotive industry. It was so predictable that I've often wondered how GM executives didn't see it coming. Hummer is a car brand that essentially yells subprime crisis. Almost every single car manufacturer, even when they failed, was born with a purpose. Hummer was no exception. The brand was born with the goal of selling civilian versions of the classical Humvee, capable and reliable off-roaders. As the years went by, however, it turned into a brand that did nothing but sell SUVs and pickups that depended on pop culture references to move. When the Great Recession hit and people realized that both the Hummer H2 and H3 were useless, unreliable, not that well equipped, and not even good off-road, sales collapsed, and with them, Hummer came down. In fact, Hummer's collapse almost brought down GM as a whole. But how did this manufacturer end in this situation, and what factors make me believe that Hummer is the worst car maker of the past 30 years? That's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Hummers didn't start as civilian vehicles, nor did they begin with the name Hummer. By the end of the 1960s, the US Army was still using Second World War Jeeps, and they needed a new vehicle. After testing not so successfully with all kinds of heavy, mid-size, and light trucks, they decided that the best thing to do would be to create a new vehicle from the ground up, something that would be tailor-made for the US Army's necessities. A versatile, relatively light, and capable vehicle able to be driven in terrain as varied as forests, jungles, and deserts. The US government required a vehicle with at least 40 centimeters of ground clearance, the capability to climb slopes of at least 20 degrees, and 76 centimeters of weighting capacity. Over 60 prototypes were presented for what would become the new icon of the US Army, including one presented by Lamborghini. The winner was a prototype presented by AM General, the military division of the American Motor Company. It was called the High Mobility Multipurpose Wheeled Vehicle, better known as Humvee. The Humvee was officially released in 1983 and became an instant success in the military. It soon developed the image of an off-roader that could do anything. After nearly 10 years of being exclusively a military vehicle, AM General decided to create a civilian version of the Humvee, which it called the Hummer. At that time, Hummer was not a brand in itself, but simply a model, the AM General Hummer. Not a lot of bad things could be said about this first Hummer. Some people criticized its reliability and claimed it was slow, heavy, and had virtually no comfort equipment. I don't believe this criticism is justified when you're talking about what is a military vehicle for civilian use. In these early Hummers, you could inflate and deflate the tires automatically with the push of a button. Many celebrities, including Arnold Schwarzenegger, bought several units of these Hummers, turning them slowly into cult vehicles, the closest thing to a real off-roader that you can find. Then, in 1999, the story of Hummer as a standalone brand began when General Motors acquired the rights to the vehicle from AM General. The AM General Hummer was renamed the Hummer H1. In fact, the H1 kept being produced in AM's factory in Indiana. There are no doubts about it. The H1 is a monster, properly built to live outside paved road surfaces. But the same can't be said about the subsequent models. On the other hand, we must also not forget that the H1 cost, in the US, slightly over $100,000. Hummer as a brand started going downhill as soon as it came into existence when GM asked AM General to design and build the H2. The H2 had nothing to do with the H1 except for its design and shared most components with the Chevy Silverado and Tahoe of the time. The H2 sought to be sold purely based on the marketing and image created by the H1. And at the start, it turned out to be a very successful strategy. With the 6-liter V8 putting out 316 horsepower under the hood, it was sold as a more compact version of the military vehicle, powerful, capable off-road, and luxurious. Well, it really isn't any of that. Powerful, yeah, but not more powerful than a Suburban. Luxurious, yeah, but again, no more than a Suburban or a well-equipped Tahoe. And while we're talking about luxury and comfort, the interior of the H2 was significantly smaller and more cramped than what you'd expect, judging by its exterior dimensions. Good off-road? Well, that's where we're going now. The Hummer H2 based its marketing on being an indestructible car capable of anything. An SUV that could go through any road, something that was quite far from the truth. Even looking beyond the fact that American cars of the time did not have the best interior quality or reliability, the main issue was the platform that it was based on. The Hummer H2 was quite far from being the ideal vehicle to off-road in. First, there was the weight issue. At over 2,900 kilograms, the H2 was simply too heavy to be useful in most complicated terrains, especially mud or sand. Then there was its size. When off-roading, the narrower the vehicle, the better. And the H2 was enormous, and especially wide. In its defense, I should say that it did have very good approach and departure angles, as well as amazing ground clearance. Its Achilles heel, however, was what happened to their tie rods when they were pushed hard. They would simply crack, quickly ending any adventure you may be having. There are many YouTube videos showing this failure on terrain that is not particularly tough, and many owners end up upgrading theirs. Not happy with the H2, Hummer launched its most economical product, the H3. It maintains some of the advantages of the H2 like the body on frame and good angles, but it had the same defects and an incredibly low quality interior to compensate for its price. When the brand first launched, Hummer sold incredibly well at a time where gas was cheap and any car would sell well, in part thanks to access to cheap and plentiful credit. But what moved most Hummers was that it was a cool product. In retrospect, I'm not really sure why, but the early 2000s were a time in which cars such as a PD Cruiser or Ford Thunderbird sought to turn your car into a statement. When the recession came, sales collapsed, causing Hummer to fail and contributing to General Motors' bankruptcy. In 2009, just 10 years after its founding, Hummer shut down. A brand that based all its marketing on its best product, the H1, an SUV that wasn't even born as a Hummer. On a more personal and subjective note, I believe that Hummer's design has also aged very poorly. Meanwhile, all the SUVs that then rivaled the Hummer are still alive and doing well. The Range Rover is more luxurious than ever. The G Wagon has an incredibly long waiting list, and the Wrangler is still as tough as always. Now it's been over a decade and Hummer is getting reborn as an eco-friendly alternative, an electric SUV with over 1,000 horsepower. We'll see if it ends up being successful. I sincerely hope they've learned from some of the mistakes of the past and that the brand is relaunched successfully. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment letting me know if you agree with the statement in the title of this video. If you don't, let me know what brand you think is the worst brand of the past 30 years. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content on this channel. Cheers!